We ended up being in a lot of predominantly white spaces, and that really impacted, my identity. Even though we were in
Mhm.
Black churches and things like that, I oftentimes felt like I was trying to keep up with these white girls and how they were looked at and accepted. And they're, especially when you look at media and, content that, you see out there, it usually is not geared towards seeing other young Black girls. So I was really trying to find myself at that time and wondering, like, where do I fit in all of this? And so I spent my younger years trying to find my way to fit in.
Mhm.
And oftentimes that I felt like gave me a little bit of this kind of like identity crisis. And it wasn't until I got older and I went to college and kind of had my own experiences, once again being one of the only in the room. It gave me the courage though that I needed to accept myself and to love myself as I was, um,
Mhm.
without trying to feel like I needed to, fit in with anybody. But that was a journey for me. It didn't happen
Right.
instantly. Like, it was a journey.
Mhm. And I know you talk about just your college experience. I've heard some of that story, and what advice would you give? I was just at a wedding a few weeks ago, and one of my uh, one of the young ladies that's involved that was a part of the wedding party. She goes to a predominantly PWI, and she is involved in the Christian organization there. And she was just talking about how she's the only one. And I mean, it just set off all types of alarms for me because I was really concerned, and because I know where that can lead. I
Mhm.
know, even the trauma. I'm glad she's involved in a Christian organization, but I do understand sometimes that means losing a part of yourself. What was some of that, for your story? What advice would you give to someone like her who's in those environments now, and they can't fully be themselves, or are they, what advice would you give? What advice would you give to someone in that environment now?
I would tell them it would be really
Hmm.
good for them to find a space where they can be fully themselves
Yeah.
and where they have other people around them that also look like them. It doesn't mean everybody has to look like you, but it is, you lose so much of yourself when you're
Hmm.
the only, because whether you're trying to or not, you're going to be assimilating, you're
Yeah.
going to be letting go pieces of yourself, just trying to keep up in the environment. And a lot of it is, it's like in our subconscious, but it happens.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I would say be somewhere where you can show up freely, because otherwise you'll have to unlearn, the things that you've done to kind of suppress your personality, suppress your voice, or even temper it, right? To kind of fit in. And one of the things that I see people do, and I, want them to kind of step out of, is feeling like you have to temper your voice in order to be in these environments. You should be able to show up fully as yourself, as a Black Christian in the space you want to be in, and be accepted fully for your voice as it is, without
Hmm.
editing. And there's a lot of editing you have to do in
Hmm.
those spaces sometimes.
Yeah, even as it relates to, you talk about the assimilation part, and that's something that you have had to pick up the pieces with. I think you mentioned, being often called the white Black girl. What does that even mean? Like what, I've heard it before, and I remember being highly offended by it. And the person thought they were giving me a compliment, and I'm like, that's not a compliment. And so, what are some of the things that you've had to deal with as it relates to, um, I guess you would say, shedding that? Because, like, first of all, we're not monolithic, and so you are your own person and how you show up in these environments. But you know, being called the white black girl, what does that mean? And it's not just, I mean, and I see even people of color do that. I've had people in my family say that to me, and because you say things a certain way, or because you shop at a certain store, or because you eat a certain thing, they say that, like, we kind of box blackness in,
Hmm.
and anything outside of that peripheral is considered other, in that. How have you dealt with that?
Yeah, so when I was younger and I was called a black white girl, or they would call me like an Oreo, black on the
Mm,
white outside, white on the inside, and I was trying to fit in so much that I was like, okay, like I was accepting of it, I was
mm,
happy about it. I was like, I'm fitting in, and this is what I'm talking about. That's why I'm
right,
saying,
right.
girl, leave because
Yeah.
you'll have to. You'll have to undo what I had to undo,
Right,
and you have
right,
to
right.
detangle yourself from that.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
had to ask myself, why I wanted to be accepted, why I was okay with myself being called a black white girl growing up. What did that
Mhm,
mean to me? Why was I, happy about that proximity to
mhm,
whiteness in the way where I was
mhm,
trading myself, trading my identity,
mhm,
and all of those things. So first I had to dig deep and start there. And that happened in college. That was like where that
mhm,
process was really beginning for me. And the other thing I would say is that I had to really begin the journey of understanding that I was okay as I was as a black
mhm,
girl. There were black people who also told me you're like a black white girl because of the way you talk.
mhm.
And the truth is, my mom she didn't let me talk slang, so we
Right.
were gonna get in trouble if we did. So, I mean, this is just kind of like what how she taught me how to speak, if you will.
And if
So,
you've ever met Faith's mom, who is beautiful inside and out, you would know exactly what she's talking about.
mm-hmm,
But and this is the thing, Faith, and I know, like, I'm trying to be careful here, in how I say this, but I'm just gonna be real on this podcast, you guys. Let's be real. Like, when I was talking to this young lady, I wanted to say, get out. Like, dude, get away. Like, you need to go far, far away from it, because I can see this 10 years from now, what she's going to have to really deconstruct it, untangle herself.
mm-hmm,
And you can see it sometimes wearing um, on their um, just heavy on her, in a sense, and on her confidence and stuff.
mm-hmm,
And so the real thing I want to say is, no, you need to find you a group of people, that is going to accept you for who you are. Like, this way is not the only way as it relates to Christianity.
right,
Like, find a more try to find a more diverse group. And if that group is not really trying to be diverse, you have to ask why. And I
right.
bet you, I would like to know, like, when you were trying to detangle all of this, did you lose a lot of friends in the midst of that?
Oh yeah, I did lose
Yeah,
friends. I
yeah.
can tell you that through all of high school and then my early 20s, I had more white friends than I did black
Mhm,
friends. And, now I'm in my 30s, I have more black friends than I do white friends. Most of those
mhm,
people that I would say I consider to be super close to, or the best of friends, we really aren't friends in the same way. Those friendships are more
mhm.
like we're associated or we see each other on social media, but we don't really talk much.